Hello, amateurs. Welcome to episode 108 of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some wonderful rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got another fantastic guest for you today. He's another Scotsman, which have been common on the podcast recently, but this guy's spent a lot of time in many other rugby cultures, and I'm really excited to learn all about that today. So please welcome Mr. Jonathan Flynn. Jonathan, how are you?
Hi, Tim. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very well. Welcome to the podcast.
Now, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Now, a little bit of a role reversal today. I'm typically abroad and my guests are back in the UK, but currently I'm in the UK and you're somewhere abroad. So tell me where you are and how you came to be there.
So I'm in Madrid. I'm in Madrid at the moment. I'm coaching at Alcobendas Rugby. It's kind of northern suburbs of Madrid. And I've been here since September, yeah.
Okay, so just one season so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great. And what's your role specifically there at Alcobendas?
So I work with the senior squad. I'm kind of assistant coach. I do forwards coach effectively, and then I do some support for the academy coaches as well. Around mainly to help the coaches as opposed to directly coaching the players. So around under 16, under 18 age groups, the club has a really big academy set up. 3 teams at under 16 and 2 teams at under 18, 3 teams at under 14, all that kind of stuff. So that it's a really big academy set up, and I've been helping the coaches there as they've come into, particularly in this later part of the season, they've come into sort of playoff games and Madrid regional finals, etc. So there's quite a lot of that going on. Yeah.
So what are the key things that you're trying to improve in those coaches at the moment? What do they need the most from you?
Yeah, well, my background is I'm a trainer and educator with World Rugby, so I've delivered coach education in the last few years for World Rugby to a few different unions throughout Europe. And it's not that I'm trying to improve them directly myself. It's more trying to put ideas out there that they could make, just to make them think a little bit more about what they're coaching, how they're engaging, and then also around how they approach a game. Do they necessarily play their strongest team every game, or do they rotate players? Do they maybe start with a weaker team, give some of the less experienced players an opportunity to start a game? All kind of things like that, really, just to try and promote a little bit of thinking among the coaches there as well.
Yeah, I understand that completely. I think as young coaches, people want to be told what to do a lot of the time, as well as players do. But of course, you want people to take the game forward and make their own decisions, and therefore they have to think themselves. So what kind of tactics are you using to sort of do that?
Oh yeah, well, a lot of it's getting them to think. So maybe just making suggestions or looking at something that they're doing, and then just saying, or how have you thought about this as an alternative? I'm certainly not trying to reinvent the wheel with them. They've got good coaches in place in general, and they've got players who've got a really good basic level of understanding. The players here, they really know rugby. They're very competent, actually, for their age, because part of the reason for that is that the time on task is so high. I mean, the academy teams will regularly train 3 times a week, and they'll be doing gym, maybe a little bit of gym beforehand as well, or a split throughout the session where some will be doing gym and some will be doing field stuff. The sporting culture here in Spain is really big, actually. The sort of sports center where the academy train is kind of multi-sport venue with tennis and football and swimming and basketball, everything there, and it's really, really popular. Like, the sheer number of people going through it is incredible. So there's a sort of culture of training and culture of sport. So what you're finding is that they've got quite a high kind of rugby IQ, really, for their age compared to some other countries I've worked. So So, and that feeds through to the senior team as well, Tim. You know, I know we're digressing a little bit, but that feeds through to the senior team, that we're getting guys coming through playing in the senior team with a good level of sort of rugby IQ at a relatively young age.
So I find that really interesting that they're coming through with that level of rugby IQ now. But how long has that been the case? Because I think of Spain as a relatively young rugby nation. So when did all this start sort of really bearing fruit, so to speak?
Well, I'm not sure, because I've only been here since September, but from my sort of time in Rugby Europe, I've coached sort of tier 3 international team and stuff before. I think that we've got to bear in mind, Spain have qualified for the last 2 World Cups. It's just that they've not been allowed to participate in the tournament. They've been disqualified for various reasons, but they have come through 2 World Cup qualifying cycles. So they're obviously, rugby's in a fairly healthy state here. I mean, people are probably not aware of this, but in Madrid alone, there's 50 rugby clubs.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
And I'm at Alcobendas. They're one of the biggest, but there's, some would be very small clubs, maybe only a senior team, or maybe only junior teams, or maybe only a women's team. But there are 50 separate rugby clubs, within the region, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So tell me a bit more about the general club scene there in Spain. You say Alcobendas are one of the top. So are they playing in like the top division? And how deep does it go?
So no, the club were moved to the second division last year. They were sort of relegated to the second division last year, but mainly due to sort of an administrative issue rather than any on-field stuff. So when I came in this year, we were in the second division, and obviously the objective was to come back up to Division d'Honneur, which is the top division. So we're in what's called Division Honor B, and in that division in Spain we have 3 pools of, I think it was 3 pools of 9 or 3 pools of 10 initially. So you had 9 or 10, 8 or 9 first. I think it was 3 pools of 10, so we had 9 first round games. We played them all once. And the 3 pools are sort of split roughly geographically. So you would have a kind of pool across the north with the Basque Country and Santander and these kind of places in it. A pool that would be more to the east and north, so a sort of Catalan-based pool around Barcelona and down to maybe Valencia. And then there's another pool with Madrid and the south, the sort of classic south of Spain, so Sevilla, Alicante, Malaga, Sevilla, and Almeria were in it. So we're in that pool, and we had 2 or 3 kind of Madrid derbies in that pool as well, to start off with. And if I'm honest, I think 3 pools is probably too many, because we're a pretty strong side. And we won some games by quite big scores in that first phase. Okay, I think 2 pools might have been a little bit more appropriate, just in terms of kind of keeping teams around the same level. But so what happens is we played in 1 pool out of 3, and then the top 3 from each pool progress through to what they call the pool elite. Right. And that means so there's 9 teams in the pool elite. So we play another 8 games. We've just finished that. We finished top. We're unbeaten, actually. We finished top. And so now we then have to play semi-finals against the team who came 4th. And then we've just got through that on the weekend, home and away. And we come through to a final now, which is also home and away. So you're talking like a good kind of 23, 24 games, and maybe a couple of friendlies at the start. So it's a really full season. There's no, if I look around Europe at how some countries are organized, here in Spain, it really is week to week grind. It's a full season, considering the players aren't professional. They're semi-pro or even amateur, depending on where you are.
And how do the players feel about that? Do they enjoy that week on week action, or do they wish there was sort of maybe the odd break here or there?
It's an interesting question, Tim. They're obviously really used to it, because it's kind of the same at junior level as well. There's a full season. The junior teams have only just finished their season last weekend. I think there was under 16 Spanish national finals were on Sunday. Under 18 were the week before. The season starts in October, so you get a slightly longer, a slightly later start. But they're just finishing now with the finals and stuff. And I can tell the players are used to it, but you can really see that they really appreciate a weekend off, because it's the kind of only chance you get to travel or to visit family or do whatever you need to do.
About travel,
they're crazy about a weekend off. You can really sense it.
Yeah. But mentioning travel there, you listed off a fair few places that would make a great away trip. What are the away trips like in Spain? Like
brilliant.
for yourself, but also for the Spanish.
Absolutely brilliant, honestly. So I coached in France last season, and I've played in France a lot over the years. And one thing about France is you're on buses everywhere. You're on long bus trips, especially from the east of France where I was based. Long trips, 5-6 hours, and in France. You're probably aware of this, but in the Fédéral leagues, there's two teams. You're traveling with a reserve team. And the French, being the French, they like to arrive really early, have a proper restaurant booked, in the city where you're going. So you're on the road from like the middle of the night the day before, half the time, trying to get down to these places. In Spain, we travel by high-speed train whenever it's possible. So the high-speed train here is very, very good. So it's I think it's more economical for the club than chartering a bus every week. I think so. We travel by high speed train, and then a bus will pick us up at whichever city we're going. So we're in Barcelona 2 weeks ago. We leave in the morning around 8:30, and the train to Barcelona is about 2.5 hours. Sort of zips up there. Then you get like a team bus would just pick us up right at the train station and take us to the ground, and then we're back the same day. Because the train's so efficient. Now, when we've had to travel by bus, where there's no AVE, no high speed train, that's not too bad either. We would just travel the day before and take a hotel and stuff. And we traveled to, for example, Almeria, which is down on the Mediterranean coast, sort of halfway down between south of Alicante and Murcia and north of Malaga and places like that. It's that kind of middle block. And we traveled down there. It was February, I think, so it was still really cold in Madrid. Got down there. It was beautiful, sunny weather, and we got off the bus. We got off the bus at the hotel. On the Saturday, we were playing on the Sunday. We got off the bus at the hotel, and there was a huge crowd of people kind of like looking at us as if, what are you doing here? And I thought, I don't know what they're looking at. Anyway, so we walked in the hotel in our tracksuits and that. And then a few minutes later, one of the boys said to me, he goes, "Hey, John, I think Barca is staying here." And so we checked in and we went out for a walk. And by the time we'd gone out for our walk, there was more and more people packing out outside the hotel. And then by the time we got back from our walk, there was like crowds and crowds of people being kept back by the police. And we got through and we sort of waited in reception and people were like clapping and cheering even as we went through by this time. And then FC Barcelona's team bus turned up, all painted up beautifully, like really smart looking Cupra bus. And the crowd went absolutely berserk. And there was, even that night, once Barcelona had come in and checked in, there was like hundreds of people still just hanging around outside the hotel waiting for a glimpse. So every time, if you open your window to look out, the crowd started cheering because they just thought it might be one of the Barcelona guys opening the window, Yeah.
So you probably had some fun with that.
Yeah, it's really good though from a logistics perspective. It makes preparing for a game easier actually, because it's just a little bit more streamlined than it was in France. In France, things are a little bit more unwieldy. You've got two teams, and like I say, they're kind of insistent and culturally that they want to sit down and have a proper pre-match meal, and that's great, and I loved it. But sometimes it's just not possible with regard to travel, and the benefit of being kind of in and out is is better. It outweighs maybe the slightly better prep you would have in France in terms of time around the stadium and stuff. So
yeah. Next question is, how's your Spanish? Is everything done in Spanish, or is it a lot of English speakers there as well? How does it work?
So that's a really good question as well, because I didn't speak any before I came here. Well, I could probably read a menu and order a beer or some food, but so it's got better. I practice every day because you really need to speak it though. The head coach speaks Spanish and a little bit of more English now because he makes an effort with me. But it's quite interesting. I'm used to working in Belgium or Luxembourg or Germany or where kind of everybody handles English as a second language, and then when I'm speaking French in France is no issue for me because I speak it. I've spoken it professionally for years, but in Spain, one thing I really noticed is a lot of younger people really don't speak English, really don't. So it can be a challenge, and we've got guys from we've got quite a multinational team here. We've got players from Spain, obviously, Argentina, some of whom speak English, some don't. Uruguay, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Italy, France, and I probably missed a country somewhere along there as well. So we've got a really multinational kind of group. Oh, Holland, we've got a Dutch guy. So we've got a really multinational group, but of them probably there's very few native English speakers. There's only 2 really, and then there's a few speak it as a second language, but quite a few don't speak it at all. And so you have to try to coach in another language, and that's partly why I came. It's to take me out of my comfort zone and challenge me a bit more. And it is really challenging. Honestly, it's really, really challenging. But there's kind of ways you can get around it a little bit by, for example, if I put a video clip in the group chat, then I obviously can. It's easy enough to translate what I'm looking for into Spanish there, and then you can kind of address it later on with the guys if you need to, or pre-match. I can make some notes. And now I'm at the stage where I can sort of make a couple of notes for any chat pre-match, but I can kind of do it without looking at my notes now. But if I have to do something on the fly, like in the huddle post-game, I think my Spanish is pretty sketchy, to put it mildly. And,
what are some of the key phrases that you've learned so far in Spanish with regards to
agilidad antes del contact, like agility before the collision, or haz tu papel, do your job. Haz tu trabajo, and do your job again. There's a lot of stuff around doing your job, doing your role. You know what I mean?
For sure. Okay, let's take a little walk backwards, Jonathan.
Yeah.
How did you first get into rugby? Tell me about your sort of rugby origin story.
Oh yeah. Well, it was at school in Edinburgh actually. Kind of got made to play it, and I really didn't like it. I really didn't like it when I was about 12, 13, or 12, up to the age of about 12. I didn't like it. It started around 10, I think. And I really didn't like it at all. And then I just kind of got into it as, I think what happened was a couple of players, Scotland had a good team, this kind of late 80s, and Scotland had a good team, and there's a couple of good players in there, and just kind of hooked me in a little bit. But it's something I've always remembered now, is that I really didn't like rugby back then. So some of the kids who I see now at rugby clubs around Europe, I'm kind of aware that they might not like rugby that much. It can sometimes be the parents putting them in there. So I think that's a little tool that I can sometimes use when sort of dealing with kids and coaches a little bit, thinking, right, they might not like the game that much, and then you can sort of adapt the message you're trying to get across and take that into consideration. So got into it in school, yeah. And then university, post-university, so played all through university. And then post-university, I went out to Canada for a season, played out there. Montreal, which is a sort of summer season out there. Came back, was playing club rugby in Edinburgh. And
Pause there for a second. I want to hear about rugby in Canada. That's the French-speaking part of Canada as well, isn't it?
Yeah, Montreal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that suited you well. What was the culture of rugby like there in your experience?
Well, it was back in the day, sort of like late 90s. It was based around being in shape and being fit. They seem to think if you were gym fit, you would be a good rugby player. But it's completely moved since then. Or it's moved substantially since then. I was coaching a team the last 2 seasons at the Dubai Sevens. I've been coaching the Canadian Irregulars in the Open International tournament at the Dubai Sevens, and we've got sort of Canadian core there in the team and some Scottish guys and stuff. And nowadays, their rugby experience and their rugby kind of IQ is way higher than it was back then. So yeah, I can see it's evolved dramatically in Canada over the last 15 years or so.
That's interesting that their rugby IQ's involved, but their national team performance has kind of gone the other way. Can you sort of suggest any reason for that?
Yeah, I suspect it's because of other countries have moved forward faster than them. I really do. Professionalism has moved other countries ahead quicker. I actually remember that back in the late 90s playing out there. You reminded me of another story where I was playing against some old, grizzled sort of number 8. And there was a bit of sledging in the game, a bit of chat back and forth, because we had a young guy from British Columbia who'd played for Canada under 18, and he was getting a bit mouthy with this older guy. And I jumped in, and because this guy said, yeah, well, you might have played for Canada under 18, son. I played for Canada. And I went, oh, yeah, when was that then? And the guy just looked at me straight in the eye and said, when we beat Scotland. And I thought, wow, okay. Time for me to just shut up and sit down,
Yeah. Do you know who it was?
No, I can't remember his name. But I remember the game he was talking about. I looked up the game he was talking about, and it was like a couple of years before they'd beaten Scotland. Yeah.
That's funny. So where did you go to playing after that, after Canada?
Yeah, so I was playing a little bit of club rugby in Edinburgh, and then what happened was I actually went back to Canada the following season for a month. I took all my kind of leave from work, went back to Canada for a month, played a bit again to help the boys out because they were really struggling the following season. And then I played a couple of seasons in Edinburgh, just club rugby, and then so I played at Trinity for a season, and then Brackies, and then I got a job in Luxembourg, but basically was recruited by the rugby club there to come out and play rugby for them because they were playing in Belgium at the time, and they had just progressed to the first division in Belgium, and they needed some new players because they needed to have 2 teams actually. So it was Rugby Club Luxembourg, which has kind of like become a home club really over the years. They're 50 years old this year actually. 50 years. It's their 50th anniversary, and so I went out there to play for them and stayed for a few seasons working and playing a bit of rugby in Belgium and France. And then what happened was I became eligible for the national team. So I got capped by the national team after my eligibility passed through. And then I left Luxembourg for a couple of years and I went to play for Guernsey Raiders in England.
Uh-huh.
And I was working over in the Channel Islands, playing rugby for Guernsey Raiders. Did 2 seasons with them. And then I came back to Luxembourg because I was living on a small island. It was a bit of a tricky place to live, to be honest. So great time, fantastic time, but yeah, it was... It's like
was that the time when Guernsey were sort of going up through the league?
Yeah, they were just coming up. Yeah, just starting to move up. Yeah, exactly. Just starting to move up. We got 2 promotions, I think. Or we got one. They just got promoted when I went. Then we got promoted again. Yeah. Then we maintained our place in the league. So, yeah, exactly. So it was brilliant. I mean, it was a great setup over there. The weather's fantastic. The rugby was phenomenal. But yeah, from a sort of professional point of view, I thought, there's no way I'm going to stay here. And quite a lot of the guys who I played with were leaving as well around the same time. So I moved back to Luxembourg. Actually, moved back to Luxembourg again for working in finance.
How did that initial contact come about? How did they find you and ask you to go and play in Luxembourg?
It was actually through an advert in Rugby World. Do you remember, like, Rugby World magazine? There used to be sort of like classified ads in the back. So I'd seen they had an advert, and I replied to it. I'd actually replied a couple of years before, when I was in university, I think, or something, or a few years before, and they remembered, but they said, look, at the time they didn't really have anything for sort of graduate people and stuff, and Luxembourg in those days was a really quiet backwater of a place. It's much busier now. The population's much bigger, but so yeah, I used to buy Rugby World and just look at the back, the classified ads in the back, and see who was looking for players and stuff. Back in the sort of pre-social media days, you know, yeah, just I replied to this ad, and so now, you know, but now I'd been working in finance for a few years, and, you know, career perspective. So I just moved back professionally for a job when I left Guernsey, and I ended up, you know, I ended up playing for them again. Long story short, just ended up playing for the club. By now we were playing in France because the kind of agreement with the Belgian Federation had sort of changed, let's say, fallen through a bit. So we're playing in the regional leagues in France, and we'd been playing there before I left as well. Became captain of the club anyway, and we got promoted. We got the team promoted, and we were looking quite good. And then we kind of hit a ceiling in France where they wouldn't allow us to move any further, any higher back in those days, because we couldn't move into the Fédéral leagues because we weren't from France. Basically, was effectively what happened. So I kind of proposed to the club that we moved across to play in Germany and join the German league. Mm-hmm. Luxembourg is just too small to have its own league. You know, there's only
how many clubs are there?
So there's two senior clubs, two senior men's teams. And there's another. At the time, there was only three in total. There was one club went up to under 18s, but there's now another couple of clubs that are going at kind of école level, just at rugby school level, so up to about under 12-ish sort of thing. So there's three clubs with sort of junior setups, if you like, and two with senior setups. One has a women's team, you know, so it's really, really small, but it's a tiny country, 500,000 people. But I've been traveling back. You know, I've been traveling back to play for the national team when I was with Guernsey. We played the World Cup qualifiers for the 07 World Cup. 07? Yeah, the 07 World Cup, I think. Yeah, and then
who was in your group? Who were you playing against?
We had Germany, who absolutely hammered us. They destroyed us. They were really strong at the time, actually. But they just destroyed us. It was the last time that the groups were Rugby Europe, or World Rugby changed it after this, but it used to be a bit like the football groups where everybody had you know, like a strong nation and then some minnows, and you know what I mean, like. But they scrapped it after this. I think the boys went to Moldova as well. I wasn't around for that one or whatever. And then we played Denmark, who we got really close to beating, and they were well ahead of us at the time. And Austria, I think it was Austria, and they might have even gone Azerbaijan at that point or something. It was maybe not Moldova, maybe it was Azerbaijan or something. They went somewhere obscure anyway. So I've been traveling back anyway just to play for them over a couple of years, and so I was playing for the national team again and captaining the club and stuff. And I ended up, you know, being there for a number of years, and eventually, what happened was, you know, I kind of stopped playing, and I was a bit disillusioned with rugby, to be quite honest, Tim. I was a bit fed up with it.
How come? Why was that?
I think it was more like the volunteer culture that existed back in the day at the club. You know, people were we'd had like a bit of success, and with very few people involved, you know. And then, of course, with success, like any of these sort of not-for-profits, people started to jump in and try and get involved and tell us what to do. And you know, it's kind of just leave the rugby side to myself and one or two other people. And you know, like by then I was like player coach. You know, I started kind of player coaching them and got another guy in as captain who was really good. And we were moving really well. And we'd start playing in Germany. We'd play in the second division at the time, but back then it was quite strong, the second league, and we're very close to being promoted to the first division at the time, which was again quite a strong league back then. And I just was a bit disillusioned with it, you know, trying to kind of juggle the politics as much as well as play and as well as coach and as well as get on buses, and you know what I mean. So stopped for a season, and at the time the national team, we had a long-term New Zealand coach called Marty Davis who had been with Luxembourg for many years, and he was kind of close to retirement age, but he was still working in Luxembourg. And I ended up, I was doing, just to kind of fill time, I'd done a couple of my coaching courses, you know, kind of formal World Rugby badges, if you like. And I ended up going to Marty spoke to me and he said, look, what are you doing next season, or this season rather? And I said, well, I'm having a season. I was off that season. He said, like, what are you doing next season? And I said, I'm not really sure actually. But part of I think it was my level 2. I'd done my level 2, and you needed to be kind of coaching. You needed to be doing some practical coaching as well to complete the L2. And I said, yeah, I'm looking for something just to obviously to formalize this and finish the level 2. And he said to me, look, why don't you come in and do some stuff with the national team? So we started off doing a little bit with the under-20 program, which was a really small program, just run at the end of the summer holidays, because in those days Luxembourg had no university, so kids would go away, and it was more like a way of capturing the kids and making sure they were still involved and keeping an eye on what level, if any, people were at. So I did a little bit with them, and then going into the following season, you know, so I had 1 year off, and then as we came into the next season, Marty said, look, you know, because the guy who was assistant coach was sort of stepping back for work reasons, and they just said to me, look, why don't you come in and help me with the national team? So I started doing that, and it just kind of coincided with a kind of perfect storm where I think maybe Marty just needed a second person pushing in exactly the same direction. You know, it was one of these things where as coaches we're just completely aligned, and we worked together on the senior team and the under-18s that year. You know, kind of in the doldrums at the time, partly because, you know, I'll put my hand up, I was one of the players who had us down there. You know what I mean? We were struggling. We weren't winning, and we were struggling every year in the Rugby Europe competitions. And we just started to move, you know, we just started to kind of change the old guard, like guys like myself. We kind of got rid of them basically, and started to move with a younger breed of player, and yeah, Luxembourg, our rugby went up and up and up. And you know, we when I started, we're in the mid 90s, and you know, when I finished, we're in the 50s in world rankings. And it was down to, you know, kind of culture change, really, you know.
Yeah, what's the kind of makeup of the national team? Are there sort of imports like South who qualify through residency, or most of them sort of local born and bred? What's the kind of makeup?
So I'm not exactly sure now what their makeup is, but when I was there, I finished in just kind of around lockdown. I finished up, but we had. When I was playing, we had loads and loads of expats, probably mostly French, but you know, all nations really, because Luxembourg is about 50% foreigner. The population is roughly 50-50. It's actually more foreigners now than Luxembourgish people, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it's an EU capital. There's a lot of EU institutions there and all this kind of stuff. But as time moved on, a lot of the guys who were started to play had actually been born in Luxembourg. More and more were actually born in Luxembourg. They may not be born to Luxembourgish parents, but they were born and raised there. Maybe to foreign parents, or maybe to Luxembourgish parents. So the dynamic changed more and more. I would say though that, the majority were probably of French or French extraction, and then some English-speaking nations as well, more sort of rugby countries where maybe parents had got their kids into the game, or put them into rugby because the parents liked it, that kind of thing. And so a real mix. We had all sorts of nations playing for us. Italian and Dutch and Welsh and you name it. We had kind of everybody at different points. French, Belgian, Luxembourgish, Scandinavians. All sorts. So Scottish.
Okay, back to you, Jonathan. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about travel here, about playing in lots of different places. Where did that passion for sort of seeing the world and using rugby as a vehicle for it come from?
I'm not sure, Tim. I haven't really thought about it. I think since I moved into coaching, though, I think part of the thing is, to be quite honest, Scotland's quite tough to find opportunities to coach. I've got friends, I've got guys I've worked with who, have gone back to Scotland and really struggled to find professional opportunities. Really struggled. Even part-time opportunities. So I kind of by a natural process, I've sort of looked elsewhere and just to see where how I could move on my coaching journey a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I should tell the listeners that before we started recording today, you had to go and turn on the air conditioning because it was too hot there, and I'm sure there's nobody in Scotland doing that right now. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because this kind of stuff, it takes you out your comfort zone. Like I said, it really does. I think I've probably visited over 20 countries, just for rugby. I would have guessed. We've played pretty much everywhere in Europe now. Whether it was, Rugby Europe under-18 competitions, Rugby Europe sevens, international matches with Luxembourg, league games with France and Belgium, and friendlies, coaching trips, coaching workshops. I think there's only 2 or 3 nations I've sort of not rocked up in yet for rugby.
You're gonna have to get there at some point, Jonathan.
I don't know if they play in places like Belarus. That's all, but I'm just not sure.
Maybe you have to go there and start their rugby program. But so that's Europe. But you've been literally about as far as you can go in this world, in terms of the rugby world, certainly anyway. And that's over to New Zealand recently as well. How did that come about? And tell me about that experience.
Yeah. So that's kind of another story, but effectively, so I'd applied to go on the IRANS course. A friend of mine had done the IRANS course, International Rugby Academy New Zealand, in 2019, I think he did it. And then I was going to do it in 2020, having chatted to him about it. And then lockdown hit. And I think I was still working for the Luxembourg Union at that point, because I'd kind of transitioned over the years through assistant coach into head coach of the national team and all that stuff. And so what happened was I was coaching in France last season at Metz in Fédéral 2, kind of in the east of France, and they'd kind of be the sort of preeminent club in the region, because around where I live in the east in Luxembourg, it's not a big rugby area in France, as you're probably aware. That rugby tends to come kind of south of Lyon, or the Paris region would be kind of very popular. Rugby would be very popular in the north, but there's not so much in the east. And so I was coaching down there, and as often happens, they had a bit of sort of financial difficulties. It's always the same around this kind of level. There's kind of financial difficulties. Director of rugby gets moved on because they can't afford him. President then gets moved on. Club goes into financial meltdown, and coaches get let go. You know the sort of thing. So because it's very, very, it's more semi-amateur than semi-professional. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of very precarious position. Yeah. And so I was on the road. I was driving down to Metz a lot. I was doing some stuff at effectively their academy. It's called Centre d'Entraînement Labellisé, and it's effectively where it's linked to a secondary school. And you know, they get audited by the federation. They have to have the stamp in place, you know, so they have to have, say, professional staff, like a professional coach and professional S&C in place and stuff. So doing some stuff with the academy and then a senior team as well in France, forwards coaching, doing some defence, that kind of thing. And then they basically chopped my contract early and said, look, we can't afford to pay you anymore. So I was really at a loss of what I was going to do, because I was supposed to be with them for another 3 or 4 months. And I really didn't know where the next paycheck was coming from. And my friend said to me, well, look, why don't you apply to New Zealand, because they've just reopened the borders. They've literally just reopened the borders. And he kind of nailed it for me. He said, look, you treat it like a master's. You know what I mean? He said, because obviously I couldn't really justify the cost to myself. It cost a lot, and flights were crazy expensive, the cost of the course, etc. But he said, look, treat it like a master's. You know, and I'm not, these days I'm really not very academically inclined. I'm really into learning and sort of development, but I'm not really into hard study. So I kind of thought I'm never really going to realistically going to sit and do an academic master's. So I applied. Iran's had just reopened. It was their first course that they'd run for over 2 years. So I thought, well, I'll apply and try and jump on that. And it's run by Murray Mexted, you know, the sort of famous former All Black captain. So he rang me up, and I said to him, look, I've got some reservations. It's a lot of money and a long, long way to come just for, you know, this. And I asked him who else was on it, and at the time there wasn't that many people on it. And I thought, right, okay. And then so I talked to him about, look, is there anything else I could do when I'm out there? And I kind of badgered him basically and said, look, you know, I'm coming a long way here. Help me out. So eventually, what I proposed to him was that maybe I could go in and spend a bit of time with Manawatu, the NPC team, who are based in Palmerston North. And fortunately, one of the head coach of Manawatu at the time was Peter Russell, who had coached Newcastle Falcons in the English Premiership a few years ago. So he was due to come in as one of the guest lecturers for one of the days of the course. So Murray had a word with him and said, look, we've got a guy from Scotland. Is it okay if he maybe after the course comes in with you guys? So Peter Russell said, look, why doesn't he come in with us for a week as well? They're in pre-season mode, and, you know, do a bit of CPD stuff. So then I had a look around, thought about one or two other places, you know, one or two other little bits of CPD type stuff I could do as well, talking to coaches, visiting people and stuff. And I decided to go out and make a bit of a trip of it. So I was out there for probably over a month anyway in total. Yeah, it was great. Went down, did the Iran's course, which ran for, I don't know, 8-9 days or something. And it was all kind of high performance focused. I was very, very fortunate. I think the kind of main anchor on the course, the main kind of key delivery guy, the guy who was basically heading up, anchoring the sort of delivery side of it, was Colin Cooper. And Colin Cooper's he's coached the Chiefs, he's head coached the Chiefs, he's head coached the Highlanders, I think, and the Maori All Blacks. So he's probably New Zealand's most experienced coach, actually, in terms of the sort of teams he's had. Obviously, you got your Wayne Smith and the like, but in terms of diversity of teams he's dealt with, he's certainly one of the most experienced coaches. And I think he actually really drove it for us, you know, because he was actually missing on the final day. He had to go and coach a club game. He was coaching his local club in the finals, and it was quite something to him. The level actually dropped that day that he wasn't there. You know, he's really, really phenomenal. You know, some of the exercises we were doing, it was literally like sit you down and say, look, we would review a video of Chiefs Crusaders 2019 or whichever season he was there. Chiefs had beaten the Crusaders or whatever, and they said, right, now how are you going to beat us, sort of thing, you know. And you know, we would have to go through it, and he would sit there and literally say, what, you think you're going to do that? Do you know what I mean? And pull you apart. So it was really, really good. There's some good people on it. It was based around, the way they do it, it's really a players course for young sort of emerging players around that kind of 16 to 19 sort of age, from Australia, New Zealand, and some American kids on it and stuff as well. And it's basically built around them with a sort of cadre of coaches sitting above, kind of learning as this players program goes through. So the players are kind of building up to a game against a sort of provincial side in New Zealand, and then we're sort of piggybacking on that, basically sitting in the boardroom, going through stuff, and jumping out, doing some on-field stuff with the young playing group as well.
How much sort of on-field stuff did you do? How much coaching experience did you get there?
We didn't do a lot. My friend who was on it previously, he did. They had a bit more. I think it sort of depends on the course and how it's structured. We didn't do an awful lot. We jumped on. Dave Ellis was there, who was skills coach at Connacht for a long time, and the Blues and numerous other courses and stuff. And I'd actually spoken to him before I went on it about, was it worth it, sort of thing. And so he was great. He does tons and tons of sort of skills drills with the players. So you could jump out, watch whatever they were doing. They would get us to do a little bits and pieces as well. But I think there was a kind of acceptance that you can coach when you're on it. You know what I mean? There's a sort of acceptance that, look, we know you can coach, and they're happy for you to sort of not spoon feed you, but for us to ask questions and kind of look for ideas and talk to people. Doug Howlett's son was on the course so Doug was on with us quite a bit. He sort of dropped in quite a lot, during the week. And there was a number of former All Blacks in at different points, but Doug Howlett was there for most of the week because, as I can say, his son was on it, with us as well. So it was interesting, really, really interesting. There was some great inputs on it, and I learned a lot and came back kind of reinvigorated, if you like, looking for a new challenge, because I think I would have felt quite frustrated if I'd been out in New Zealand in the summer learning as much as I did and then come back and not be coaching at a decent level. So when Spain popped up, I kind of jumped on it, and thought, right, I'm going to go down and hopefully put some of these things into action a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what were some of those kind of key takeaways? What were some of the biggest influences you got from that time down in New Zealand?
Yeah, interesting. I think one of the things, like pure on field was you have to earn the right to go hard on defense, to go up and in, because we talked a lot around defense stuff, and I was coaching at two teams last year. I was coaching in Luxembourg with the club side and in France, and we talked about, I actually mentioned it a few times. We were finding amateur level we were being beaten on the drift by good teams who could get around us on the outside. But we were basically dumping and fanning on D, and we weren't really contesting the breakdown at all, because, as you probably are aware, amateur level, amateur referees, a lot of the breakdowns are kind of 50-50. But Colin Cooper was adamant. He said, "Look, John, you have to go hard at the breakdown. You cannot let them have quick ball, And I think that was really my biggest takeaway. Everything around that has kind of changed the way I think a little bit about the game. I was kind of happy before for my teams to make teams work hard to exit, for example, make them work really hard to exit down in their own 22. But in other parts of the field, I was happy enough if we didn't stick our head into rucks, if we didn't, overcommit, risk penalties, etc. And culturally in France, that's quite something, because the French go after every breakdown. Pretty much from top 14 down to regional league. That the breakdown's a bit of a war in France, and that's how that's their culture. So we tried to instill a little bit of discipline in that in France and say, look, lads, don't go in as much, things like that. No, you can't obviously tell them not to at all, but I was happier if they maybe sat off a little bit. But what Colin Cooper was saying is, no, you need to slow their ball down. Absolutely have to, kind of thing. And again, this is someone you're talking about who's coming from Super Rugby, where ball can be lightning quick, and it's impossible to defend. So we things like counter rucking have become much bigger for me now because of that. Rather than trying to jackal a ball, definitely looking to get guys off the ground and counter hard when possible, looking for opportunities to counter ruck, and in order to just slow the ruck down enough for us to get square on defense, get our line set, and then get off the line. So that I think that area around the breakdown is something that it really made me think about on the course, and it's definitely revised how I would coach rugby now. You know, it's not dramatic, but it's definitely a tweak that I would consider now. Like, you know, we're looking to deny teams quick ball. You know, we're looking at, can we wrestle on our feet, but you know, add a wrestle to make the tackle last a few seconds longer, to stop the player just getting quickly to floor, finding elbows and knees, you know, things like that. So yeah, quite a few techniques that the course has put ideas into, or made me think of things. What can I do to adapt that and to buy us time on defence? You know,
that's super interesting, because I think when most people talk about rugby, whether it's in a coaching sense or just generally talking about the game, most people talk about attack and how people attack and how they try and make space and things like that. So I think it's amazing that you came away from that sort of really impressive course, and the number one thing you're thinking about or is improved is how to stop other teams attacking you. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, it's true. New Zealand's quite an attack-focused country, but it was probably something that, you know, planted one or two seeds of doubt in my head before I went, as I say, because we've been beaten on the drift a couple of times, trying to just go up and out and sort of jockey teams. And, you know, good sides were getting past us with two or three good passes and getting around our edge. And then when but like chatting to guys who've coached Super Rugby, you know, it was they were really clear that we've got to, you know, basically don't think of the breakdown as such a risk. You know what I mean? And that's a really useful takeaway for me. You know, we can manage, because now I'm working out ways that we can manage behaviours to stop the referees, you know, wanting to penalise us at the breakdown. You know what I mean? We can counter in other ways, such as counter rucking, such as wrestling, rather than having to put hands in and try and, you know, jackal a ball, risk going off our feet. And so it's made me think more creatively, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so at some point, obviously, your time in Spain will come to an end. What other countries are on your list of places that you'd like to go to?
I really don't know. I really would love to stay here. I really would. I love the rugby here. It's a good level, and it feels like it's going places. You know, Spain feels like, in rugby terms, that it's really going places. So I would genuinely like to stay here. But if I can't, then I guess I'm looking for opportunities. That's all there is to it. You know, I've had a bit of contact from one or two other clubs, but I think that my number one option would definitely be to stay here, to stay in Spain, and ideally to stay with Alcobendas, because I really like the club. I like Madrid, and I think that it's a program that could really go places.
Interesting. Okay, so just a bigger general question: if people want to do what you're doing, you know, using sort of rugby as a sort of vehicle to see the world, what advice would you give them?
I mean, if you're a player, there's really are numerous opportunities. You know, it's tough for British guys now with Brexit. Obviously, that's a clear problem for UK guys. I mean, there's no doubt the club here have been super clear. We're looking for EU players. You know, but for example, Irish guys, I think the world really is your oyster in terms of traveling and playing. And I'm sure for UK guys, you know, out with the EU, it can be, you know, there's still tons of opportunities, because the rugby footprint's getting bigger and bigger. You know, there's no doubt. I think things like university now, you know, the US has become an option around university, which, you know, wasn't really there in our day, if you like. So the opportunity to study and play. If people really want to go abroad, just kind of keep your eyes open. I think there's always sort of social media teams advertising via social media and stuff, looking for players and things. So particularly for guys who are happy to sort of work and play at the same time, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll bring this part of the show to a close, so we'll move on to the stash section now, Jonathan. So what's your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
So I had to think about this. I'm a bit of a stash geek, actually. So I think my favourite bit of stash that I've received from like a team that I actually, sort of issued is when I was at Metz last year, we got these gilets. They're like sort of lightweight sleeveless gilets, and I really liked it. I actually bought one from the club shop because they didn't give us them to start with. They gave us like the big winter jacket for traveling, but I really liked the gilet for kind of wearing on the sideline. So I bought one, and then later they actually issued the staff. They issued them to us as well. So I've got a second one, But they're pretty cool, and they're just this kind of like in between super thin and super thick. They're kind of like lightweight but sleeveless, and so I really like those. They look pretty good. I think that's probably the best bit of kit that I've actually received. I've got one or two jerseys like I've sort of acquired over the years that are quite cool. I've got one of the All Black jerseys from 2000, like a team issued one. Which was the first sort of Adidas one with the grip panels on it and all that, around the sort of Jonah Lomu era, which you couldn't buy in the shops. So I've got one of those, and I got a Lions jersey off the 2001 Lions tour, the one to Australia, with the small collar. Again, a tour issued one that was a sort of spare, that has the grip panels, and it's made of a completely different material from the replicas and stuff. So I've picked up quite a few quite cool items over the years. But in terms of sort of issued kit, my Metz gilet is probably my number one.
That's a first for the podcast, Jonathan. Nobody's ever said a gilet was their number one bit of kit.
Yeah. I was thinking about that because I've heard a few of the podcasts, and it's usually some sort of Sevens vests or something like that, or beachwear. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely I think it is my gilet actually. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And so, what's your favorite kit of all time? So this can be any kit from any team, any era.
Again, it's a really tough one. I had to think about this. I think it's probably the Brumbies kind of classic late 90s with milk across the front of it, sort of Joe Roth, maybe Stephen Larkham kind of era, that sort of time, George Gregan. I'm a bit of a Brumbies fan, and that kind of old school jersey. I've actually got one. I've got one from a few years later, from like about 2007. It's kind of really similar, and I was actually wearing it at the club here the other week, and about 4 different people mentioned it to me. Sort of old school cotton. Honestly, I walked into training, and like 4 or 5 different people, kids, senior players, people coming up to me, oh man, I love the jersey and stuff. So yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. I've got probably 2 or 3 others that would push it close, but that kind of classic old school Brumbies is probably my favorite.
That's a good choice, and another first for the podcast. I don't think anybody else has said that before either. So, but great choice.
I really racked my brains on it. I really sort of racked my brains thinking about it because there's a few contenders over the years.
Okay, and what about any awful kits? What about kits that you really hate at the moment?
Edinburgh in about 2015 had this sort of weird camouflage thing that was like camouflage is difficult at the best of times, but their colours were white, red, and black. So I thought that was a disaster, and it was worse because the socks were camouflage as well, which made it just look to me ridiculous. Yeah, I think that's probably the worst. But to be honest, Tim, Edinburgh have had 2 or 3 disasters over the years, around that kind of away kit, third kit sort of thing. They would have some kind of weird spider's webs on it or something. You know what I mean? Some kind of odd. And red and black should be, as the colours were back then, should be reasonably easy to get quite good kit. But they seem to consistently produce bad ones, I felt,
Cool. Okay. So as we bring this to a close, is there sort of anything else you want to say, or any closing thoughts at all?
No, I don't think so. I just want to say thanks very much for having me. I appreciate I've ranted on a bit and rambled, but I've really enjoyed chatting to you. And I'm happy to sort of chat rugby with anybody. So if anybody wants to get in touch about anything we've talked about, feel free to. It's no problem at all. I'm happy to talk rugby with pretty much anybody. I had a friend on Zoom last night, who's doing his PhD, and he sort of tapped into me as a sort of subject matter, and we had a bit of a Zoom call with 2 or 3 other coaches last night, just talking through some thoughts around his PhD, and I was delighted to be on, to be honest, because I'm as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a rugby geek, so I can happy to chat about the game to pretty much anybody. So feel free to reach out if I can help you with anything.
Amazing, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure, a real pleasure talking to you, and I'd just love to hear about all these different rugby cultures as well. But if people do want to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh yeah, well, probably by Twitter, Instagram, JP Flynn Lux, or via LinkedIn is always good as well. I'm on LinkedIn, and they can reach me there. There's not that many people with my name who are in rugby and stuff. So,
and if people want to find out more about Alcobendas Rugby, what would they be doing?
Again, it's at Alcobendas Rugby website or social media. The club's really active on social media. Actually, they churn out quite a lot of content, keeping everybody up to date. So yeah, that's probably the best place to get them is via Instagram, Facebook.
Great stuff. And all of that plus everything else we've spoken about today will be you can find in one place, which is on the website amateurrugbypodcast.com. So Jonathan, that just leaves me to say thank you one last time. It's been great to chat to you, and hopefully we'll do it again one day.
Absolutely. Loved it, Tim. Take care.
Good man. Okay, there he goes. Jonathan, thanks so much for that. It was really good to hear about all your rugby experiences, and there's some great learning points in there around cultures and just coaching and all kinds of different things. So really good. Now I am right in the middle of the Great Rugger Run training, which is coming up again. It's going to be in August this year in south of Wales, and then all the way through to Gloucestershire. Training's increasing at the moment. I'm up to 4 runs a week now, and I've just had some new trainers come through, which is always great this time of year. If you want to find out about the Great Rugger Run, then you can do so at thegreatruggerrun.org, and we'll be raising funds for the My Name's Doddy Foundation once again this year. Join me again next week when I'll have another fantastic guest for you. Don't know who it's going to be yet, so it's going to be lucky dip, see who turns up. And you can follow the podcast. We're active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I've been putting up a few fun little YouTube shorts this week, so go ahead over there and have a look at those. And subscribe if you want to help me out and see everything else that I've got to offer. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, you could rate and review on your podcast player, like, share, retweet, or even join the community at patreon.com/amateur rugby podcast. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. But until then, get out and play.